rise. Stop rolling the dice and just compromise. It's the chance of your life. Okay, try to be brave. You have so much to save. Take control of your own life. Right now, every mistake makes you feel like a fake. Take control of your own life. Nothing in life is good. Tied in with
Welcome to Cyber Threat Intel, your go-to source for the latest updates, news, and insights on cyber threats. Our goal is to arm you with the knowledge to protect yourself in the digital age, whether you're a cybersecurity professional or just curious about the threats lurking in the digital shadows. Make sure to subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast listening platform to join us on the front lines of cybersecurity, because in the world of cyber threats, knowledge is power. Welcome. This is episode number 8 of Cyber Threat Intel, and I'm your host, John Good. If this is the first time that you're joining us, typically what we do here is we start off by taking about 5 minutes or so, giving people a few minutes to show up and really get settled in. So if you're just joining the stream, make sure that you go grab a drink or a snack or something and really just start getting ready for the stream. I have some coffee here, which is always great. I guess the alternative would be like an energy drink, a Monster, or something like that, Red Bull, which those are always great too. But that's not what I have right now. So welcome to Marvin. Marvin's joining the stream. Marvin, where are you from again? I can't remember. I know you've been on a few of the streams here. I can't remember if it was Miami or it's been a few different locations. But welcome regardless. Glad to see you back here. Again, with this stream, just like yesterday, we're streaming to multiple platforms here. Yep. Okay. So Marvin's from Miami. Hey, Kyle, how's it going? So just like yesterday, we're streaming to multiple platforms here. So we are streaming to YouTube. YouTube is the primary location. Also, we're streaming to LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. So we're trying to get the word out to as many people as possible. So we are not locking this into just one platform. So if we continue to have a lot of viewership on these other platforms, and we'll continue to do that. Otherwise, we'll stick to YouTube because YouTube is our standard platform. So how can you find the show? How can you find the show if you're trying to watch it or listen to it? Well, of course, like I just said, there's a few different ways. Typically, this is live streamed. So it is live streamed at least to YouTube, but we're trying out different platforms. So we're streaming to a bunch of those platforms. You can find it on the John Good Cyber YouTube channel. You can find it on my LinkedIn page, so John Good or John Good Cyber. You can find it on my Twitter or X page, so John Good Cyber on there as well. And then also Facebook too, so the John Good Cyber page. So a few different ways that you can find it. Also, if you're interested in just the audio only version of this, then you can go to cyberthreatintel.com. You can see all the different platforms that we're on for podcasting. Or you can just go to your popular podcasting platform or your favorite platform, whether that's Spotify, iTunes, whatever, right? Like there's a whole bunch of them, but you can go there and search for us as well. Again, the show is Cyber Threat Intel, so it's pretty easy to find, right? Pretty common terminology. So that is a great way to do that as well. If you go to the cyberthreatintel.com website, though, one thing that you can find there also is you can find the article feed. So you can find all the articles that we talk about, as well as some other articles that we don't mention. You can find the previous episode articles and all of that good stuff. We also put highlights. Sometimes we put notes in there, so you can also see important facts about those articles as well. So a lot of different ways that you can track the information. As far as maintaining certifications, if you have certifications, so you're in the industry, you're trying to get into the career field, whatever the case is, right? You have your CISSP, Security Plus, whatever. This can count as a half a CPE. Typically, we take the next 30 to 45 minutes to talk about the articles. So you get a half a CPE towards maintaining that certification. So make sure that you take advantage of that and that you don't miss out on that value, because I know those can be a challenge sometimes to get, but the more frequently that you do it, the better off that you are. That's why we always have these shows. So you will always have half a CPE that you can get and put towards those certifications. So that's a whole bunch over the year, right? Just over the year, if you just attend the shows, you will have plenty to renew your certifications. So keep that in mind and don't miss out on that. Hello, Eduardo. Great to see you. Great show. Appreciate it. So with that being said, we're going to give people a few more minutes here and to show up. And while we do that, we're going to take a second to talk about our sponsor for this segment, and that's Cyber Training Pro. So I'll see you on the other side. Are you tired of overpaying for cybersecurity training? Are you interested in training from industry professionals? Are you looking for cybersecurity career services? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then cybertrainingpro.com is the perfect platform for you. At Cyber Training Pro, we're a one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity needs. We can train you for industry certifications or just improve your overall knowledge and skills in a certain area. Unlike other platforms, we don't stop there. We can also coach you throughout your career, practice your interview skills, or create a high-performing resume with our career services. CybertrainingPro.com isn't just another training platform. Students get exclusive access to our private community where we go beyond training courses to provide additional content, tips and tricks, and engagement with both other students and staff. Look, by the year 2025, there could be as many as 3.5 million job openings in cybersecurity. With so much opportunity, why not maximize your career potential with a platform that cares about your success? Come join us at cybertrainingpro.com and start building your future today. All right, thanks to cybertrainingpro.com for that. If you're interested in training, career services, resume reviews, all those kinds of things, I know people really need those and they like to take advantage of those, then head on over to cybertrainingpro.com and you can check all that stuff out. That is where I do all my coaching. That's where I put all my training as well. So the things that don't end up on YouTube or other platforms, that's the best place to go. So with that being said, if you're a company and you're stumbling upon this and you want to sponsor content, I'm always looking for sponsors for content to support the efforts of the channel and the shows. So if you're interested in that, then make sure to check out the description because there is more information about how you can initiate that and get that conversation started. So definitely make sure to check out that as well. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump into the articles now. All right, so first article here exclusive, a high-level election security group is back. NSA and Cyber Command want to keep it under the radar. So this is definitely that time of the year. U.S. Cyber Command and the National Security Agency will not identify the latest leaders of their Joint Election Security Task Force, in part to shield them from the threats and harassment other election officials have received for merely being associated with such work. In a departure from previous election cycles, neither organization will publicize the names of the co-chiefs of the Election Security Group, ESG, because of the often hostile environment surrounding U.S. elections since the 2020 presidential race, recorded Future News has learned. So if you aren't familiar with how elections work and like everything's kind of surrounding this article or this piece of news, a lot of times with elections, the people that are in charge of it or the people that are running it, a lot of times will face extra scrutiny and people will, go crazy against them, right? Like that's just the truth of it. And we've seen that happen several times and people questioning the results and how the election was put into place, how it was ran, like all of these things, right? So during the election, that's like the worst time for all of that to be happening. And that's true with, really anything. And that's why this is kind of a big deal, right? For elections, because in a democracy, right, which is like what the United States is in, that is one of our most important things that we have because those are the people that are going to set laws and basically run the country or run the government for whatever they're being voted into, right? And so it's really important that that whole process is protected, the integrity of that process, that it's not manipulated. And, it's pretty serious if it is manipulated and the winner is not the true winner, right? So there's all kinds of issues around elections. I'm sure you've seen a lot of stuff about the elections, right? Shift in strategy and the heightened concern for the safety of officials both comes as the Biden administration warns of political foreign interference in the November elections, as well as dangers to individuals who help run the system, right? And that's the other thing, is that they're trying to prevent other entities, outside influence, whether that is just people within the country, so within the U.S., or other governments, other people of power, anything like that is anywhere really, not just within the United States. And so that is definitely a serious concern that they, rightfully so, want to prevent. Now it says the warnings are on top of longstanding concerns about potential cyber attacks targeting voting infrastructure. So that's one of the reasons why, the voting machines and everything like that is a serious business, or human errors becoming amplified and influence operations that undermine confidence in election outcomes. Remember, that's what I was talking about, influencing the election or confidence in those results, the integrity of it. especially with the rise of commercially available artificial intelligence tools that can assist an array of attacks at scale. Right? Here we go. Artificial intelligence. Although a good thing, it can be used in a bad way or a malicious way, right? A lot of different technologies and tools that are out there have multi-uses, right? That's why you see things like import-export laws and just protections of certain IP or technology. And it's a serious thing, especially as artificial intelligence continues to ramp up. That is going to cause all kinds of new concerns that we didn't have before because it's making things more accessible to leverage extreme amounts of computing power. It also has a quote in here. It says, since the end of 2020 to the present day, there's been a very consistent environment that really sort of celebrates and encourages threats to public officials, according to Kim Wyman, a Republican who served as Washington's Secretary of State for 8 years and later oversaw CISA's election security portfolio, which is separate from the NSA Cybercom Task Force. So again, just an overall emphasis on protecting the integrity of the election and those who are involved in it, because we can't have people compromising that election or messing with the results or anything like that, right? We need to maintain the the integrity of it, right? And the results and making sure everything is legitimate and those kinds of things. So voting will always be a concern, and especially if things continue to be digitized and we start going to this more computer-based kind of system with things like voting and other important things, obviously cybersecurity becomes even more of a concern, right? How do we protect those systems? How do we find the flaws? Do we take the system over to Black Hat and or DEF CON and have people test it out? What do we do, right? Next article here, Intel shares Microsoft's new AI PC definition, launches AI PC acceleration programs, and Core Ultra Meteor Lake NUC developer kits at AI conference. Excuse me. Intel announced 2 new extensions to its AI PC acceleration program in Taipei, Taiwan, with a new PC developer program that's designed to attract smaller independent software vendors, ISVs, and even individual developers, and an independent hardware vendor, IHV, a program that assists partners developing AI-centric hardware. Intel is also launching a new Core Ultra Meteor Lake NUC development kit and introducing Microsoft's new definition of just what constitutes of an AI PC. We were given a glimpse of how AI PCs will deliver better battery life, higher performance, and new features, says the article. It also says Intel launched its AI developer program in October of last year, but it's kicking off its new programs here at a developer event in Taipei that includes hands-on time with the new dev kits. So they're really trying to get more companies interested in AI and how they can leverage the power of different parts, different components, different frameworks, different kits, right? Like all of these things. It's kind of a domino effect, right? Where you kind of build on and you're trying to just really get people interested in to use more AI and leverage that power, right? There's a lot of power in AI, no question about it. So what is an AI PC? This says numerous companies, including Intel, AMD, Apple, and soon Qualcomm with its X Elite chips, have developed silicon with purpose-built AI accelerators residing on chip alongside the standard CPU and GPU cores. However, each has its own take on what constitutes as an AI PC. Tech companies can't agree. Can you imagine, right? That's not rare, right? Companies never can agree, right? Microsoft and Intel's new co-developed definition states that an AI PC will come with a neural processing unit, an NPU, or a learning computer, if you ask Sylvester Stallone in Terminator, CPU and GPU that support Microsoft's Copilot and come with a physical Copilot key directly on the keyboard that replaces the second Windows key on the right side of the keyboard. So you're losing a key on your keyboard for this. While Intel and Microsoft are now promoting this jointly developed definition of an AI PC, Intel itself has a simpler definition that says, and this is their definition, it requires a CPU, GPU, and NPU, which is that extra part, right, with its own AI-specific acceleration capabilities. Intel envisions shuffling AI workloads between these 3 units based on the type of compute needed, with the NPU providing exceptional power proficiency for lower intensity AI workloads like photo, audio, and video processing while delivering faster response times than cloud-based services, thus boosting battery life and performance while ensuring data privacy by keeping data on the local machine. So they're trying to basically make all this stuff more efficient in how it operates, right? Along with this new NPU unit. And they're trying to just balance that stuff so there's not extra power consumption. It's, lower, more efficient with the power. It is more efficient overall with how it's doing what it's doing, right? And Marvin says it's going to be hard for companies, this AI war, because this every company will have their standards. NVIDIA, Microsoft, Intel, Apple, etc. Yeah, I mean, we've seen this with so many new technologies, right? We saw this with networking. We saw this really with everything, right? Like all of these companies have their different definitions of what they think X technology is. And then eventually over time, what happens is somebody kind of takes the lead, right? Some organization or some new entity is formed, nonprofit, something, right? And then they start developing the standards. We've seen that with other areas again in technology. And if you are learning about Network Plus certification or Security Plus certification, A Plus, any of those, especially those, because those talk about a lot of that dated kind of stuff and kind of how we got to where we are today. So things like IEEE, right? The wireless standards and all of those different network authentication standards and everything like that, right? The 802.x, we'll just say, all of those standards, right? That's a very common thing that's covered in the Network Plus. So that's kind of the idea, right? We saw one company originally created technology and then they didn't want to run with it or they didn't want to maintain it. Something happened, some other entity was formed, and then they started managing that and pushing out standards, right? So it's a natural evolution, right? That just happens with anything. But it's early on, right? We're gonna see a lot of these companies try to push the envelope, push the edge as far as the capabilities, and then somebody's gonna win as far as their technology, and then it's gonna kind of evolve out of that point. So definitely a good article worth reading if you're interested in AI. AI is obviously booming and very popular right now, right? It's starting to be in the news all the time. So yeah, we will we'll definitely keep an eye on that, right?
Yes.
That's right. All right, moving on here. Lawmakers set sights on data minimization as states seek to limit companies from capturing vast amounts of personal info. Comprehensive data privacy bill that includes the country's toughest data minimization standards is on the cusp of passing the Maryland state legislature, giving advocates hope that similar bills will follow nationwide. The Maryland Online Data Privacy Act has passed both the state's House and Senate and will go to a conference committee where small differences between the versions will be ironed out. It's expected to pass by April 8th. The bill's sponsor, Maryland State Delegate Sarah Love, told Recorded Future News in an interview. So what do we know about data privacy laws, right? Seems like things are definitely starting to pick up in the United States, especially. Obviously, other countries have a lot more strict requirements in a lot of cases, but this is something that we've been seeing kind of evolve over the last couple of years. The bill stands out because of its requirements that the gathering, processing, or sharing of sensitive information be strictly necessary when a vendor is completing a consumer's service request. Under so-called data minimization laws, vendors typically must collect or use a minimal amount of information, only what's needed, right? Only what's needed to deliver a service, and may only retain the data they collect for as long as it takes to render the service. So that's pretty standard with data collection, that you would maintain that data for as long as you need it. But one of the things with that definition is that's kind of a loose definition, right? Because, well, how long do you need it? Do you actually need it tied to that contract? Like, how does that whole process kind of work out, right? And so it's an area where, especially for a consumer, where it's a little bit gray, right? It says data minimization is central to reform because if legislation blocks vendors from collecting irrelevant data, the personal information they can sell to data brokers and advertisers for monetization will be dramatically reduced, as will the chances for consumer harm through data breaches. So how many companies have we seen that over collect data, right? A bunch, right? There's a lot of them. And when they're doing it, we're just like, right? It's just like, why do you need to collect so much information? You don't even use most of that information, but they do it, right? They collect the information, they retain it. So we see that a lot. We also see when you go to sign up for a service that all of a sudden you start receiving other emails or other communication that you definitely didn't sign up for. And then it's one of those things, I get it, right? And one of those things where you look at it and you're like, well, I know I didn't sign up for that service or that newsletter or whatever that is, because I would have never signed up for that. So then it's a question of, well, who sold my data, right? Where did that data come from? So one of the things that I've seen recommended before is creating specific email addresses for specific services, right? And then if you get email to that email address, then you know who sold your data, right? You know who did it. But, does that stop it? Well, no, of course not, because some of these companies just sell off data like it's nothing, right? Sell it off like it's nothing. And it's unfortunate from a consumer standpoint, right? But from a company standpoint too, if you over collect data, depending on the kind of data that it is, you can get in trouble eventually, right? If you have so much data and then all of a sudden you have like a data breach that happens or something like that, well, now because you've over collected data, are you on the hook for extra regulations or extra lawsuits or extra, legal action, right? So it's a concern for both. You shouldn't just default to collecting as much information as possible. That's generally not a great strategy. Recorded Future News studied the privacy policies of organizations which recently suffered data breaches and discovered that a wide variety of them collect data far beyond what they reasonably need to do business with their customers, right? This is the key point that I was basically just touching on, is that a lot of companies that are collecting data, they over collect. They are not specific enough with the data that they collect or that they store, that they retain, that they process, and they just try to collect it all, right? Well, from a company standpoint, again, legal action, there's regulations and things that can affect you. What about storage costs, right? How much storage do you need to retain this information? Do you need extra storage? How long do you store that data for, right? All of these things are concerns from not only a consumer standpoint, but also a business standpoint, right? It can affect both sides for sure. It says, what Hershey did not say is that as of May, when its privacy policy was last updated, it also collected customers' internet browsing history, device identifiers, geolocation data derived from their IP addresses, social media information, and audio and visual information, including likeness as captured in photographs or video recordings if you visit any of our physical locations. The policy says the audio data is derived from phone call recordings. So this is talking about a hacker broke into Hershey email accounts. And so it's referencing that situation. So yeah, I mean, again, data breaches happen, right? For sure. It's unfortunate when they do, but from a company standpoint, the more information that you collect, that you store, that you retain, and then you get hacked, there's just so many bad things that can come of that just besides getting hacked, right? So you have to be careful with what you're collecting. That's not always a good idea to get it all. The prevalent collection of geolocation data is especially troubling, experts say, because while companies claim that the data is anonymized, it's very easy to find out who an individual is from their location, including by analyzing the combination of home and work addresses. So think about that, right? From a data standpoint, being able to geolocate somebody where they're at, there are concerns with that, right? Depending on what the actual product or the service is, it might be more concerning than others, right? But if you're in certain locations such as, the European Union, right? All of these GDPR requirements and privacy requirements and everything like that exists, being able to geolocate somebody, that's a bad idea, right? In the United States, one of the things that we need to catch up with is privacy regulations, right? There are not enough and not the correct kind of privacy regulations in a lot of cases. And so you see companies like Facebooks or whatever, right, that are collecting massive amounts of data on you. And what if they don't use it, but then they sell off the data to somebody, some other company, some spam company, or they give access to the government or something like that, right? People that shouldn't have access based on the premises that you provided the data, but they gave away the access or the access to the data because they could, right? So there are all kinds of just it hurts my heart. It hurts me. It's so painful as just a regular consumer of technology, right? It also says a major advantage of data minimization laws is that they help overcome ineffective notice and consent systems, under which consumers typically have no idea what they're agreeing to. So you go to sign up for a service, you say, yes, I agree, but you didn't even read the terms or conditions, right? You're just agreeing blanketly, or you just, you didn't read it, you don't understand it, whatever the case is, right? If you've seen any of these terms and conditions documents or websites, they're in legal speak, right? They are a lot of times difficult to read, especially if you don't read this stuff very often, and you might get confused. You might think it says one thing, but really, in fact, it says something else. That's a reality of those kinds of documents. It also says Maryland's bill isn't the first time that the lawmakers in the U.S. have tried to put tighter data minimization rules in place. The stalled Federal American Data Privacy and Protection Act, ADPPA, had very strong data minimization language when it passed out the House Energy and Commerce Committee in July 2022 with a nearly unanimous bipartisan vote, but died in January 2023 without a floor vote. It's now languishing in committee. Yeah, so there's been other situations where they've tried to pass data legislation. A lot of times, it seems like right now that state legislation for this stuff is going through, but federal is not, because we've seen states like California, right, start to enact stuff. But at the federal level, it's still, still hesitant, I guess. So, all right. Next article here. CISA warns hackers actively attacking Microsoft SharePoint vulnerability. Is everybody still with me? I know we don't have a whole bunch more, but we got a little bit more. U.S. Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, has added a security flaw impacting Microsoft SharePoint server to its known exploited vulnerabilities KEV catalog based on evidence of active exploitation in the wild. Vulnerability tracked as CVE 2023-24955 with a CVSS score of 7.2 is a critical remote code execution flaw on RCE that allows an unauthenticated attacker with site owner privileges to execute arbitrary code. In a network-based attack, an authenticated user as a site owner, so authenticated attacker as a site owner could execute code remotely on the SharePoint server, Microsoft said in an advisory. The flaw was addressed by Microsoft as part of its Patch Tuesday, famous for it, updates for May 2023. So last year, about this time, about a month, 11 months ago. The development comes more than 2 months after CISA added CVE 2023-29357, a privilege escalation flaw in SharePoint server to its KEV catalog. Now they say here that it's worth pointing out an exploit chain combining CVE 2023-29357 and CVE 2023-24955 was demonstrated by Star Labs SG at the Pawn to Own Vancouver hacking contest last year, earning the researchers a $100,000 prize. If you don't know what Pawn to Own is, make sure that you check that out. Make sure that you research that, because it is worth knowing about if you are in the cybersecurity space, especially if you're in the hacking space. But with chaining exploits, one of the things that is important to understand about exploit chains is that basically it's the idea that you might have one vulnerability that is not, super likely to be exploited. Maybe it's a high vulnerability or something like that, but because of your environment, it's not super likely. You have other controls or something in place. As you start to need to chain vulnerabilities or exploits together, it becomes more difficult for attackers, right? So if you're trying to prioritize vulnerability remediation or vulnerability management understanding that attack chain is really important, right? Because if it's going to require chaining multiple vulnerabilities together, multiple exploits together, again, it makes it more difficult. It requires a more sophisticated attack that might not be relevant for your environment, right? Maybe you just face a lot of script kiddies and it just doesn't matter, right? Because they're not going to be able to exploit these super complicated vulnerabilities. And then you focus on the other things that they are more likely to go after, right? And so that's an important distinction or important understanding of how that kill chain works for different vulnerabilities, right? It's not just at face value that this exploit is a high vulnerability or this exploit is a low vulnerability or whatever it is, right? Sometimes too, you can chain them together and then it becomes an even worse issue, right? So it just depends. So definitely check that article out, especially if you're interested in SharePoint server specifically, but just understanding a little bit more about different exploits and how they work. 0 days exploited in the wild jumped 50% in 2023, fueled by spyware vendors. Cybersecurity experts are warning that 0-day exploits, which can be used to compromise devices before anyone is aware that they're vulnerable, have become more common as nation-state hackers and cyber criminals find sophisticated ways to carry out their exploits. Researchers from Google on Wednesday said they observed 97 0-day exploits in the wild in 2023, compared to 62 in 2022, a 50% increase. So that's a big uptick, right? That's something to definitely be aware of as far as vulnerabilities go. Of the 97 0 days, the researchers were able to attribute the threat actors' motivations for 58 of them. So that's great. That's basically just over half of them, right? 48 of the vulnerabilities were attributed to espionage actors, while the remaining 10 were attributed to financially motivated hackers. So when you're looking at vulnerabilities within your organization, right, whether you're a manager, if you're an engineer, an analyst, whatever you are, right, like if you work in IT, it doesn't matter, right? But one of the key things with cyber threat intel and with finding these vulnerabilities is the ability to attribute, right? Who can you attribute certain attacks or certain exploits to? If you can start attributing them to certain groups, well, if you also know their motivation, so financial or whatever the case is, right, then you can start to be more prepared for those attackers, right? You can properly prepare or defend against those attacks that they're likely to go after, right? If somebody is just worried about your financial systems, right? Like let's say that is literally the only enemy that you have or the only potential threat that you have. Well, then you can put all your effort and all your budget and all your controls towards protecting your financial systems, right? That's not usually the case, right? Like you don't usually just have one threat that is trying to attack you, but that's kind of the idea, right? You can use that to prioritize your efforts and make your security program better overall, right? That is what we do in general anyways, is we prioritize things based on risk, right? Because risk is going to be associated with this. So if your attacker or your threat is financially motivated, well, then those kind of vulnerabilities obviously are going to get ranked a little bit higher, maybe a high or critical vulnerability, right? Instead of like a medium, just depends. But that is what we do in a nutshell, is why we prioritize what we're doing based on the risk. And then that's kind of how it flows down, right? Like it's a domino effect of how we're applying security. Now it says, there's a quote here, Fin11 has focused heavily on the file transfer applications, and this is a group that they were talking about in here, but focus on heavily on file transfer applications, which provide efficient and effective access to sensitive victim data without the need for lateral network movement, streamlining the steps for exfiltration and monetization, the researchers said. So obviously, if attackers and hackers, they can streamline what they're doing, make it very simple for them to execute and take off data, well, they're going to do it, right? If they don't have to make things hard on themselves or difficult for themselves, they're going to do it. That's why they like to go after end users that aren't technically savvy. It's just an easier attack vector, right? Go through email like we talked about yesterday. It's just how it is. Subsequently, the large revenues generated from mass extortion or ransomware campaigns likely fuels additional investment by these groups in new vulnerabilities. Yeah, so if you're not aware, one of the major issues with things like ransomware is obviously that it makes your system inoperable, it locks up your data, right? Like it makes things difficult for you. But when you go to pay that ransomware group, they're just like a business, right? That's their profit. They're going to reinvest their profit in things that they can use to further their mission, further their business objectives, if you will. So that is one kind of flaw in their business plan, is that if companies don't pay them, how do they get these sophisticated attacks or more exploits, right? Especially like zero-day exploits. Zero-day exploits are expensive, and attackers don't generally like to drop those, as well as consulting firms and research firms and things like that, because it takes a lot of research to find those 0 days. And so if they don't have money, these malicious groups, to invest in the business kind of it dissolves, right? Just like any business. If they don't have profit, they can't pay people. They can't buy new equipment. They can't buy exploits. They can't buy AWS infrastructure to launch these attacks, right? They can't do that stuff if they aren't getting paid by victims. So that's why you see when a victim of ransomware doesn't pay, why it kind of causes this uproar especially the malicious community, because they're like, what do we do now? Like we aren't getting paid by these people. We can't fund these extra things that we wanted to do, assuming that we were going to get paid by that victim. So it is a very interesting kind of cat and mouse game, right? In terms of products that were targeted, the researchers found that the threat actors sought vulnerabilities in products or components that provided broad access to multiple targets of choice. Enterprise-specific technologies like Barracuda Email Security Gateway, Cisco Adaptive Security Appliance, Ivanti Endpoint Manager Mobile, and Sentry, and Trend Micro Apex One were repeatedly targeted, the researchers said, adding that these products typically provide widespread access and high-level permissions. So, also, if you remember that we were talking yesterday about devices that are end-of-life, right? End-of-life devices are definitely a target by malicious people, malicious attackers, actors, threat actors, those kinds of groups, because they are no longer supported by vendors. So there's no new patches, there's no, updates to them, and they're just kind of as they were. And hopefully, they're as vulnerable. They don't have anything for a couple of years, and then they're very vulnerable, right? If a new exploit comes out for this dated software, and that company hasn't updated it, well, that's an issue, right? That's why you see like Microsoft Windows XP, right? If you were to install that on a system, connect it to an internet, those things get hacked like that, right? Like there's been studies and stuff of people putting XP machines on the internet and they just like insta get hacked, right? So it's just how it is, right? Attackers want to go for the low hanging fruit. They don't want to put in extra effort if they don't need to, right? I guess that's kind of just general, like, general behavior, right? Like if you can accomplish your mission with a certain level of effort and you don't need to put in all this extra effort, you're thinking smarter, you're not working harder. So think about that, right? Even though they are bad people or malicious people, they're not dumb, right? They're not, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing and be successful, right? So keep that in mind. Now, commercial surveillance vendors, CSVs, were the leading culprit behind browser and mobile device exploitation, with Google attributing 75% of known zero-day exploits targeting Google products, as well as Android ecosystem devices in 2023, 13 of 17 vulnerabilities. So commercial surveillance vendors in general are always under the microscope. So that's not cool. So definitely check this article out too. This is a good one about 0 days. 0 days. One of the things about 0 days is that, you can't defend them in a lot of cases, unfortunately. There are measures that you can take to reduce their effectiveness and to minimize their success. But if a 0 day is found, a 0 day is found, right? Until that vendor patches it or releases a fix, then, as far as that vulnerability goes, what do you do, right? So that's why best practice is segregating your network, doing zero trust, like those kinds of things are so important because, again, 0 days aren't something that you can just fully prevent, right? You don't know about them. That's why they're called 0 days, right? I guess unless you researched it and you actually were the one that discovered the 0 day, then you might be able to fix things right away before an attacker can start exploiting it. But maybe not, right? A lot of times you're probably not the one that is finding that 0 day. Somebody probably else is. And it might have been out there for a while, which is like the scariest and worst part about that, right? If 0 day's been out for a year and nobody hears about it, you could be compromised for a year. That's not good, right? You just no. That is a painful experience. So, Storm Surge says, "Thanks for the information." You bet, of course. I enjoy these shows. So, thank you to everybody for joining. That is the last article, or thank you for watching the replay if you're tuning in after the fact. Remember that if you're looking for the video format, this particular episode is streamed on LinkedIn, on Twitter or X, on Facebook, on YouTube, all under the John Good Cyber. So if you're on the John Good Cyber page, John Good Cyber YouTube channel, John Good Cyber page on Facebook, John Good Cyber LinkedIn page, so my page, on the John Good Cyber Twitter account. All of these, this episode is streamed on there as well. If we continue to have a lot of people tuning in, we will continue to do all the different platforms because I think that gives us the most opportunity to reach the most people, which is what this is really about, trying to reach the most amount of people and make sure that you all are staying current with the news and the current cyber threat intel that's out there. So remember that you can claim this as a half CPE for your certification, so you can help maintain those. And also, if you go to cyberthreatintel.com, you can see all the podcasting platforms that we're on if you only want to hear the audio version, or you can just go to your popular podcasting platform of your choice, your favorite platform, and search for Cyber Threat Intel, the show. We're on a lot of them. So Spotify, iTunes, all of those. If you also go to the website, cyberthreatintel.com, and you look, you can see the feed. So the article feed for what we covered, as well as some other articles that we did not necessarily cover. So that is worth checking out as well. And then also, if you're a company and you're looking to sponsor content, again, we're always looking for sponsors. Check out the description because there is more information about that, how you can kick off that conversation and initiate those discussions. So with that being said, again, this was episode 8 for Cyber Threat Intel. It's March 28th, 2024. I'm your host, John Good. And I want to thank you for joining, and I will see you in the next one. See you later. Are you tired of overpaying for cybersecurity training? Are you interested in training from industry professionals? Are you looking for cybersecurity career services? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then cybertrainingpro.com is the perfect platform for you. At Cyber Training Pro, we're a one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity needs. We can train you for industry certifications or just improve your overall knowledge and skills in a certain area. Unlike other platforms, we don't stop there. We can also coach you throughout your career, practice your interview skills, or create a high-performing resume with our career services. CybertrainingPro.com isn't just another training platform. Students get exclusive access to our private community where we go beyond training courses to provide additional content, tips and tricks, and engagement with both other students and staff. Look, by the year 2025, there could be as many as 3.5 million job openings in cybersecurity. There's so much opportunity. Why not maximize your career potential with a platform that cares about your success? Come join us at cybertrainingpro.com and start building your future today.